I'm going to start out by sharing a couple of stories with you today. And if I can, I'm going to take my jacket off because I'm going to get really serious here. And I like the whistles, but I'm a little old for those. All right. Anyway, and another thing I'm going to do in a few minutes is I'm going to come down off the stage, and I'm going to get there with you. Okay. Now, why am I going to do that? Because I don't want to talk at you. I want to talk with you in a way that everyone here can leave this session fully understanding what they need to know to make everything I'm going to talk about work for you. Okay. But essentially, what I want to do is to start out with just a little bit of an explanation of my first business that I bought. And you need to know where I was coming from because it wasn't a great place. People tend to look at me now and say, Gordon, you know all this stuff. You have all these contacts. You have all this capital. And you can do anything. Yeah, I can now. I can do a lot of things now that I couldn't do when I was younger. But I have very good memories of how I started out and how broke I was and how young I was and how inexperienced I was. And I had a vision, though, that I didn't want to be that all my life, right? Okay, I wanted to amount to something, as they say, and I wanted to be in business. And I didn't even know what business I wanted to be in. I was still at that age where you're groping in the wilderness. What am I? Who am I? Where am I going in life? Oh, poor me. I went through all the things. Like, well, how am I going to do anything? I don't have any cash. Don't even have good credit. Real young, no experience. Okay, how am I going to do this? As I'm in that place, there was one thing that sort of stood out for me. It was a hobby that I had that I loved. It was motorcycling. And I had friends. We used to get on our bikes and ride up the trails in the mountains near Lake George, New York, which is where I grew up. And one day when we were riding up there, one of my friends turns to me and he says, "Hey, Gordon, I work for this parts manufacturing company. The owner's looking to retire and he's got the business up for sale." And we started joking around. Wouldn't it be neat if we bought the company? After joking around about it for a while, I was saying to myself, why not? Let's go talk to him. What do we got to lose, right? My friend made an appointment for he and I to talk to the owner of the business. And we went in and we met him. And he's talking to me like I really have the capacity to buy his business. And I don't. At least I don't think I do. But anyway, he takes us on a tour of the facilities. We ask him some questions. And finally, we come back to his office and we ask him the critical question, how much you want for the business, right? And now I'm going to give you a number. Okay. You got to put your heads back in 1970. Okay. A dollar was worth a lot more than it was then than it is now. Anyway, he says 500,000. Now that's 5 million today, just to let you know. Okay. And to me, I heard 500,000 and I didn't think of that as money. I thought of that as a telephone number. But anyway, I then asked him the next critical question, which is, how do you want that? Is there a certain amount you want down? He says, no, I want all cash. That would have ended almost anyone's conversation in my case. And it started to end the conversation. And my friend and I thanked him for his time. We got up, we were ready to leave the room. And as I get to the door, I actually turned around and I said to him, look, if I would like to give a week or two to think about this. And if I come back to you with an offer, would you be willing to look at it? And he said, yeah. I went back to I'm getting ready to go back to my home. And as we go through, the door closes behind us and I hear my friend and he says, boy, am I glad that's all. He didn't want any part of this. He would have nothing to do with this. He says, Gordon, you want to come back and give him an offer, you're on your own. Okay, I'm out of this. So now I'm on my own. Anyway, I started doing a little research and I found out that most businesses aren't sold for cash. They're sold with a down payment that could equal anywhere from 25% to 65 or 70% of the business, but there's almost always a seller take back. There's always a certain amount that they take back as a note payable over the next, say, 5 to 10 years, whatever it is that you get with them. So anyway, I start going through these things and I said, look, I could probably give them some down and then I don't have to give them the whole thing, but I don't have the down payment. So where could that come from? I'm doing more research. And then I find out that there are these lenders out there that are called asset-based lenders. And they're different than a bank because they don't make their loan on the strength of the cash flow like a bank does. The bank wants to see that the cash flow is going to be there to repay the loan. These guys don't worry about that. They do, but not really. As long as the collateral behind the loan can be liquidated for enough to pay their loan back, they don't care what happens because they know their way out is to liquidate the collateral. I found out that there were lenders out there that would loan me between 65% and 80% of the value of certain assets in the business. And as business people, you all should know what those assets are. They can be things like machinery and equipment. They can be inventory. They can be accounts receivable. They can be a whole host of things. They can even be purchase orders if you know how to finance a purchase order. There are ways to finance almost anything that comes in and out of a business. But anyway, I found a lender who was willing to loan me 80% of the value of the machinery and equipment and the accounts receivable. And I did a quick calculation and I figured out that I can come up with somewhere in the neighborhood of around 50% by just borrowing that money. And the number I think was, in fact, I'm going to go through the numbers with you in a moment so that you can actually see how numbers actually work. But the key to it was I now knew that I could find a way, once I owned the business, to give that seller his cash down payment, provided he's willing to take back a note for some portion of the premium, some portion of the result. Now, what I want to do here, and I'm going to step down here for just a moment, and let me see if I got the right slides behind this. Okay, yeah, I do. So I'm going to come down here for a moment so I can look there and see what you're seeing. So if I'm blocking anybody or in your way, let me know, and I'll gladly step to the side. All right, the first 3 months, I started negotiating with the seller. And why is that important? It's important because how many people here think of buying a business as a financial transaction, that it's primarily a financial transaction? Raise your hand, and it's okay. That's a good thing to think. A lot of money is going to change hands. Not a lot of people didn't raise your hand. I want to congratulate you for that. And for those who did raise your hand, it's perfectly normal to think of it that way. However, what I've learned then and what I've learned thousands of times since, long before a purchase of a business ever becomes a financial transaction and everything, people start talking about the money and the numbers, it is first and foremost a psychological transaction. First and foremost, a psychological transaction. Because at the end of the day, if the seller doesn't like you, trust you, and respect you, he will not do the deal with you. Okay? Oh, fuck you. He will not do the deal with you. Because what is he selling you? Is he selling you some old rag doll or some used car? No, he's selling his child that he has nurtured from infancy, where he started in his garage, that he sweated and toiled over, that's paid his family's bills for all these years and provided him with financial security. And his personal attachment or her personal attachment to that business is ironclad. They're totally attached to that business. And it's not like anything else that ever gets sold. And so the whole idea when you're talking to the seller about selling his business is you don't start out by talking numbers. You don't start out by talking dollars. You start out by talking, John, how'd you get started in this business? And you listen. Okay. And then you let him tell you about how he gets started. He'll talk for hours. Nobody's ever asked him that question before. Okay. And that's the beginning of building a cosmic bond with that seller. All of a sudden he says, wow, this guy's really interested in my business. He's interested in me. He's interested in how this all came about. And all during the negotiation sessions, I'm drawing commonalities between them and me so that they begin to see me. In this case, it was an older guy. He began to see me as himself when he was a kid. And he, from that moment, literally took me under his wing. And he decided he wanted me to own that business. And he wanted to be the person who would train me to run that business. And he wanted to be the person who could be proud of what was going to happen to his business after he sold it. He wanted to know that his customers were going to be well taken care of, that his employees would be fairly treated, okay? And that his suppliers would be as good to do business with me as they were with him. And he wanted that business to succeed once I took it over. So that's building that cosmic bond is an essential part of the process. And I'm emphasizing it more in this room than I would normally, because here everybody has a fair amount of heart that I don't find everywhere. And I compliment Doria with that, because she has a way of attracting around her extraordinary people. That's one of the reasons that I want to take this time. But during this time, we got to know each other, like each other, and respect each other. And more importantly, we got to trust each other. So that way, when it comes time for him to think about the fact that I'm going to owe him some money for a fairly long period of time, he's okay about that, okay? So that's an important part of the process. So here was our purchase price, $500,000. And obviously, he agreed to flexible terms. He agreed he would take $150,000 cash down, plus a note for $350,000 payable over 15 years. Now, he didn't have to want to wait 15 years for the money, but he agreed that with that amortization schedule, I could easily meet the payments, but in 6 to 7 years at the most, he wanted a balloon payment that would fully pay it off so he'd be done with the sale. And I knew that the note could be paid out over time from the earnings and I'd have profit left over. Okay, what I didn't know is, where am I going to get the $150,000? Okay, it's like buying a car. And I already explained this. There are asset-based lenders that I knew I could go to, and I'm probably ahead of myself here. So let me maybe stream through some of these. So this is where we would take, I looked at what we could use as collateral. Okay, and the $300,000 worth of machinery that he had in the accounts receivable would easily produce about $240,000 of cash after I owned the company. So now my problem is $150,000 of cash to close the deal that I don't have. But you probably realize that I'm halfway home right now because I know where the money can come from. Okay, I just don't have it, but I know where it's sitting. Okay, and that's an important part of the process. I don't have it, and I did a little more research, and I found that I could go to a bank. At that time, I could get something called a swing loan. Some people call it bridge financing. Now, the banker, believe me, when I go through this, he did not want to loan me $150,000. He took one look at my credit rating and one look at my youth, and my inexperience. And his comment was, and some things in life you never forget, right? Never forget them. So I'm sitting there in front of this banker, Bank of America, and he's this old school banker, right? And I'm sitting there in the chair right in front of him, and I'm explaining my grand plan. I'm going to leverage this assets, and I'm going to pay the seller a down payment, and then I'm going to go through the whole thing with him. And then I tell him I want to borrow $150,000 so that I can close the sale. And he turns to me and he says, "Now, son." And I remember looking over the top of his horn rim glasses, like, "Now, son, you don't seriously think we could loan you $150,000? Why? You don't have any kind of credit rating." Anyway, I won't tell you his whole story. It was just terrible to sit there and listen. But I knew he was going to say that. The research I did told me he was going to say that because they just don't look at loans the same way I was looking at the loan. So I had to make him some incredible promises in an incredible way to get him to loan me $150,000. I'm going to show you what I did. Okay. So my goal was to borrow $150,000, give it to the seller, make the business mine, leverage the assets in the business for the $240, and then repay the bank their $150. So the banker could see it. He could see what I was going to do. Just couldn't do it because I didn't have a credit rating. Okay. So here's what I did. All right. So here's your purchase price. All right. I didn't realize this thing was self-motivated here. All right. 500,000 purchase price. There are the numbers. They're pretty straightforward. Everybody's pretty much got them in your head already. And I'm going to have 90,000 left over when this is all done. All right. So what do I do? All right. I get a little ahead of myself here. All right. Here's what I did. I told him, "Listen, I understand you don't think I have the credit rate, but I want to make this loan so attractive for you, so risk-free to you that you can only say yes." And how? He said, "How are you going to do that?" I said, "First of all, I'm going to pay you a full month's interest on your one-day loans. Don't worry about this few dollars that you thought you were going to make on this loan. You're going to make a lot more. You're going to get a full month's interest, and the money is actually never going to leave your bank. And the loan's going to get paid off the instant that it's made. That same instant, it's going to get paid off. And at that same instant, I become your depositor here at the bank with an extra $90,000 sitting in my account, which you get to loan out to other people and make money on my money." Now, does everybody here know how a bank makes money on your money? Loan multiplier, every dollar you put in a primary deposit literally enables them to loan out 7 times that amount. 7 times, okay? And now again, I'm not sure here where you're from, but in the United States, okay, there's this thing called the Fed Reserve, the central bank. And they're the ones who make these very low interest rate loans based on what the deposits are in the bank. They'll make up to 7 times that amount for them to loan out to other people. With that method of doing it, they're taking my money, and then that enables them to borrow 6 times that amount at a very low interest rate, loan that out to other customers, and that all of it that they make in addition to what they pay is profit that they're making because I put 90 grand in the bank. So I went over that with him, right? It's important you know this because you have to let your banker know you know how they make money, okay? And you know how to be a good customer for them because what do you want to be true for them? You want them to win. Everybody is going to win when they do what you need them to do in your business. All right, so he ran for the loan forms, and here's what we did. Now, back in 1969, 70, we weren't as sophisticated then as we are today. So what I'm showing you actually happened. We actually had 2 rooms set up at the bank. Now, in today, we don't do that. It's all done in the trust department of the bank through the technique I'm going to show you, double escrows, and it's just all the escrows close together. Everybody gets their money and everybody's happy. Okay, but we actually had it set up and there were 2 rooms, and I'm going through this because I want you to see it. This really helps you see the mechanics of what happened. Okay, so sitting in room A was the seller, there's me, the buyer, and there's the banker. The banker hands me a cashier's check for $100,000 it is up there. Let me make sure that's the right number. $150,000. That's the right number. All right. So I give it to the seller. The moment the seller's hand touches that money, the deals are all signed, everything all done. He takes the money, deal done. Right? I am now the owner of that business. And as I'm taking the money there, over in room B was an officer of Topa Thrift and Loan, which was the asset-based lender that I went to set up the asset-based loan. And all the documents are signed in that room that I signed before I went into the other room, and I signed them all as if I was the owner of the business, right? My hand lets go of the check. I am the owner of the business, so all those documents are signed now by the legal owner of the business. And so the Bank of America person exchanges with the asset-based lender the paperwork. The asset-based lender gives to the banker the $240-something thousand or whatever I'm supposed to get, puts it with the teller, okay, teller's window, deposits in my account, then immediately debits my account $90,000 to pay back the loan. Now, did I ever touch the money? No. Does the banker have any question he's going to get his money back? Who's doing all this? The banker is. So that's part of the key, by the way. When you want to get something done, you put the control in the hands of the person putting up the money, okay? Because if you're handling everything and they got to wonder what you're doing with it, That's a big risk factor for them. But if you leave it and structure it so that they're handling all the money transactions, now they don't worry about it because they know the money's in their hands, so they're comfortable. You got to make people comfortable, okay? So the 150,000 goes into my account. We pay the banker off the $90,000. I'm sorry, the $150,000, and I'm left with $90,000 sitting in my checking. So that's the mechanics by which it happened. Now, today you set up a double escrow, right? The trust department of the bank. Banker handles everything. Everybody trusts the bank trust department. And the lender's putting their money in. The signed agreements are all in there. Everything's in there. And then when all of the documents are signed and the money is there, ready to go with the asset-based lender, all the escrows close. Everybody gets their money and everybody's happy. That's the way that it was done. Okay, so I'm going to speed through some of this because you've got it, okay? An asset-based loan that took effect immediately upon my ownership of the business. Bank swing loan, proceeds to be paid directly to the seller for the down payment. These activates the asset-based loan. Portion of the proceeds pays off the swing loan. With money left over, double escrow makes the swing loan risk-free to the bank, okay? Now, you know I spent a few sleepless nights thinking all that up, right? Okay, but it was worth it. All right, essentially that's the transaction. So you have escrow 1, escrow 2, and all the money changes hands. I think everybody's got a good picture of that now. Okay, so what we know is an asset-based loan, a swing loan connected by a double escrow, enables us to use the assets of the business to create the cash for the down payment to the seller. So between that form and some seller financing, now you know you can buy a business and it's only its own assets that made it possible, its own assets and cash flow. It's the term a fully leveraged buyout. That's where the term fully leveraged buyout comes from. And when you're done with this, and once you've done one, you think you've discovered entrepreneur heaven because now you can expand any business. You can do any form of acquisition because you know how to do it. You can start to build a business without money that can do all the things you want to do. In the past, you had to start from scratch. You had to save your money. You had to get somebody to believe in you. You had to get somebody to invest money in you. You have to do all this stuff. Here's a set of steps that you can follow that can put you in a business. Now, let's say the business is not the business you want, but it's aligned with it. It's close. It's something that could be moved a little bit in its business model to do what you want to do. In fact, maybe it's an old retiring person's business that's really old school, and they've never modified the business to be in touch with the new technologies. And so there's incredible profit opportunities in that business that the old owner was just a little too old school, like me, to take advantage of.